Hi everyone, it's Kevin here. Today we're talking about what a Joe Biden presidency means for you and your wealth. We'll be covering whether your taxes are going up or down, which stocks might be positively or negatively impacted, and overall whether the economy is going to benefit from the plans and policies that he's proposed to implement. Before we get started, if it's your first time here, welcome to Wealth Wins, the YouTube channel that brings you closer to financial independence every week. Hit the subscribe button down below and hit the notification bell to get more content around maximizing your wealth. Let me start by saying that before I did this video, I was pretty clueless about how a Biden administration was going to impact my wealth. And I think that probably applies for a lot of you all. If you're watching this before the November 3rd election, well, these are just campaign talking points, and so they're subject to change. And if you're watching this after the election, then we'll see how well this video ages. Saying all that, I don't want you to take what I'm talking about here as gospel, but hopefully this prompts you to do your own research and better understand how policy decisions can impact your wealth trajectory. Let's start with income and taxes. At the personal level, there's going to be tax credits for everyone. There's going to be tax credits to limit the amount of money you spend on healthcare to be only 8.5% of your overall income. And if you pay more than 8.5%, then the rest of it gets refunded through these tax credits at the end of the year. Here's a quick table listing the maximum amount you would have to pay for healthcare every month based on various levels of income. What's not clear here is whether these changes will also cover deductibles or if this only covers the healthcare premiums. If it doesn't, I can definitely see healthcare insurance companies shifting to even higher deductible plans to cover for losses in the premium side. But at least on the surface, this campaign point seems helpful. And for parents out there, there's plans to increase the child tax credit so that you get an additional $1,000 of tax credit for every child that you have to take care of. But beyond that, there's also plans to add support for childcare so that both parents can potentially go back to work. Now for the bad news. There are 3 big proposed tax increases coming your way. This really only applies if you're making $400,000 or more, though I think this may also impact people making more than $137,000 a year. The first is adding Social Security taxes to income over $400,000. This tax policy doesn't really make sense to me because it creates this gap between $137,000, which is the current Social Security tax limit, and $400,000. You're gonna have all these people who are making $400,000 to $426,000 asking their bosses for a pay cut so that they can make less. Because at $399,000, you're gonna take home more money than if you made $426,000. I think what's more likely is if we actually have this increase in Social Security taxes, it's going to apply to everyone, including people who make between $137,000 and $400,000. And if you're making more than $1 million a year, well, first, you're probably not watching this video, but if you are, I have 2 pieces of bad news. The first is the top tax level is going to increase from 37% to 39.6%, where it used to be. And the second piece of bad news, which I think is actually the biggest impact to most people's wealth, is plans to tax people's capital gains at the same rate as their normal income. So what most people don't realize is that when you're uber successful, most of your income actually doesn't come from a W-2 job or income from work. It comes from capital gains, which are money that you make from investing money, stocks, real estate, private equity, and other business ventures. And all of those things get taxed at a much different rate. Those sorts of gains get taxed at the long-term capital gains rate, which is only 20% at the moment. But under Biden's policy, you'd get taxed at the same rate as if you were working at a job. So for the top earners, that means instead of paying 20%, they're going to be paying 40%. Let that sink in for a moment. Their tax rate effectively for most of their income just doubled. And so there's going to be a ton of rich people here who are going to be looking to reduce their taxable income, either by taking those gains earlier this year when the tax rate is lower, or deferring those capital gains into the future until hopefully maybe a future president gives more generous tax breaks. All this being said, you can still smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Got you, didn't I? And after that, you can go and take advantage of various tax credits that are available to everyone. If you want to learn more about taking advantage of existing tax credits, watch my previous video about how one certain wealthy politician minimizes his taxes. Two specific tax techniques that I didn't mention in that video that I wanted to cover here. One is, if you're running a business, you can qualify for a 20% reduction in taxable income just for running the business. And you can thank 2017 Trump for that one. And the other one is you can defer or eliminate taxes on capital gains by investing in opportunity zones. For platforms where you can invest in opportunity zones, check the description down below. Corporate level, taxes are going up from 21% to a proposed 28%. But, in context, before President Trump, or I guess former President Trump now, decided to lower taxes to 21%, historically before that it was 35%. And even 35% corporate tax rate was, historically pretty low. If you look back to the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, it used to be as high as 50%. But these are just the headline rates. Because of various tax credits and tax breaks, the actual effective tax rate that many companies pay can be half or even less. In 2018, there were dozens of Fortune 500 companies that paid zero taxes on their income. So you've got Jeff over here, whose company sometimes seems like it's printing money faster than the Federal Reserve Bank, paying less in taxes than I am. Sometimes I envy the man. Why should this matter to you? Well, if Biden increases corporate tax rates, then in the short term, companies are going to be paying more in taxes, which means there's less income for them to go and invest into their workforce, which means maybe there's slower wage growth or there's fewer people being hired. But in the long run, increasing tax revenues reduces the budget deficits that we've been running every year. People forget, but back in 2013, there was concerns that the US was going to default on its debt payments. Imagine your stocks halving over the course of a week, your groceries being twice as expensive, and the home that you just bought, it's worth half of what it was last week.
No, God! No, God, please, no! No!
Well, you don't have to imagine, because this actually happened. If you look at Iceland and Greece and other countries, they've gone through this to catastrophic results. Like having all the problems caused by coronavirus happen all over again, but this time just to the US. So yeah, not great. So we talked about taxes and the economy, but what about stocks? The crystal ball here is to look where Biden wants to spend federal resources. So Biden's talked about spending on infrastructure, green energy, alternative modes of transportation, self-driving cars, and building more affordable housing, which is great because despite all the taxes that I pay, the same potholes in San Francisco don't seem like they ever get filled.
Potholes? Oh man, it's terrible. Like my tires here, it's messing up my car, these potholes.
So let's cover each of those sectors. Autonomous vehicles and alternative transportation. Obviously the big ones here are going to be Uber. Shout out to Ian, who's working on building flying vehicles. And there's also GM and Google, which through Cruise and Waymo are building autonomous vehicles. The second sector that Biden has mentioned is affordable housing. So here are three stocks for some of the biggest home builders in the US. Lennar, which builds mid-range homes in the $400,000 range. There's Pult Group, which also builds homes right around that price range. And then there's D.R. Horton, which builds homes probably more so in the $250,000 to $300,000 range. Each of these companies controls hundreds of thousands of plots of land ready to build or in the process of building, and they sell thousands of homes each month. So they're going to be really one of the driving forces to help alleviate the housing shortage. In terms of infrastructure, there's two main companies that provide most of the building materials for the roads in America. Those two are Vulcan Materials and Martin Marietta Materials. Biden also wants to invest in renewable and clean energy, and so here's 5 stocks that cover that base. The first one is NextEra Energy, which is the largest producer of renewable energy from solar and wind in the US. There's also Brookfield Renewable Partners, which produces energy from solar, wind, and hydro all over the world, with a 60% concentration in the US. The third is Atlantica Sustainable Infrastructure. They've got solar farms, wind farms, transmission lines, hydro, you name it, they've got it. They've got slightly less concentration in the US compared to BEP, and most of that concentration is in solar farms. Plug Power, which is producing hydrogen fuel cells to replace batteries in vehicles and other utilities. And SunNova, which manufactures and installs solar panels and residential energy storage devices. There's one stock that probably everyone's thinking about that I haven't mentioned, and there's a reason for that. Tesla is probably the biggest name that comes to mind when we talk about green energy, autonomous vehicles, all that good stuff. But it's kind of like the supreme of consumer stocks. It's all hype. It's really hard to recommend when its P/E ratio is 750x earnings. But if you're dead set on it, try to find a better entry price. With every changing of the guard, there's always little pockets of opportunity to take advantage of. It's just most people don't really know where they are or don't have the time to go find them out. So hopefully by watching this video, I've helped you find some opportunities that you can take advantage of sooner. And if you found this video useful, smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm. It'll help me immensely. I spend a lot of time researching and editing to share the most useful information with all of y'all. For more content like this, subscribe to the channel, comment down below about what video you'd like to see next, and don't forget to hit that notification bell. Until next time.